Hi, I'm Jesse Haynes, and this is Shakti Day One, where we talk to the founders who are building the future. I'm here today with Harrison Hochman, co-founder and CEO of Sparrow. Welcome, Harrison.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
I should maybe you should be welcoming me because we're actually here at your office, which is
Yeah.
super cool. Thanks for having us to your office.
Thank you for coming. You were officially the first guests in the
I
conference space.
I like what we've done with the conference
Yeah.
space. It works well for a podcast. You should do this more often.
It'll be the first of many.
Um, cool. So let's jump in. You've built a company called Sparrow, and just so everyone is oriented, and we're going to go deep into Sparrow a little bit later. But what is Sparrow? What have you built?
The simplest way to think of us is from our customer's perspective. We primarily serve community FIs, think credit unions. And from a credit union perspective, the problems that we solve for them, simply put, are we help them to deepen relationships with membership. If you know anything about the founding of Sparrow, it's a far cry from where we got our start. But in essence, that's what we do today. And in terms of scale and size and scope, we do this now for 132 separate credit unions in the United States, with our largest one being 36 billion in assets and 3 million members. So about 1 in 100 Americans bank with them,
Wow.
all the way down to 6 million in assets with 600 members and probably not much more than a single employee.
Oh
So
my
we
gosh.
truly do span the gamut.
You do.
And it's been a pleasure serving them all along the way.
That's great. And I want to get back to it. But let's first rewind a little bit and talk about how you ended up here serving all 132 credit unions. You started this company in college, right? You were in at Stanford, like 20 years old, and it's COVID. Take it from there.
Sure. So you're exactly right. I was a undergraduate at Stanford going into my junior year, and COVID had struck. We were all sent home. I found myself with more time than an undergraduate should probably have alone with a computer. And I'm not sure what many 19, 20-year-olds would do at that point. I decided to
Start a company.
start getting a little entrepreneurial with it. And what ended up happening was I saw a very acute pain point for a friend of mine, very close to something that not I personally experienced, but saw directly from those that I care about. Now, I was at the time learning how to code, I was learning engineering, and provided both the raw skill set to build something alongside the wanting to solve the thing I was seeing. Those two came together, and out of that cocktail came Sparrow. It's since evolved from the initial starting place, but that was the impetus. And I think that to dispel a general myth that
Yeah.
might exist about college age founders, there really wasn't this vision to disrupt
Mm.
industry in America. It was more so I saw a problem immediately in front of me, and I knew that if I solved that problem once,
Yeah.
that was good enough. That was enough for deploying my skill set on something that could have practical application for somebody I cared about. And if that led to a second person, great, but that was beyond the scope of what I was initially thinking about.
Interesting. So you did go about solving that problem, and did you and college kept on, you had to graduate from college. So how did you proceed with your entrepreneurial aspirations while also getting through school?
Yeah. So what happened to my mother, my grandmother's, the opposite of their dismay, I did graduate. I finished that degree, despite some controversy along the way as to whether or not I do that. And to flush that story forwards, what happens is we graduate from Stanford. I graduate from Stanford. My two co-founders graduate from their colleges, and it's now July of 21. The business was launched before then, but we needed to find space.
Okay.
One of our investors had a conference. Again, this is still COVID. So nobody was really back in the office.
Yeah, yeah.
And we couldn't afford conference space or office space of our own. They very graciously invited us into their conference space, which had their own racks of servers.
Okay.
So despite the fact that it was the middle of summer. They didn't really want to pay their electrical bill because nobody was coming to the office.
Mhm.
They still had to keep the servers cool. So we were in the
Ah,
conference room right next to the servers. So it was nice and cool in the New York summer and heat, despite the fact that the rest of the office was pretty hot. And we ended up using that time it was just us three, using that time to f- form the structure for what would become Sparrow in its fullest form. And it all was one long process looking backward of solving one customer problem going to the next. And I think at the time, I had such a hesitancy to take the directive that was given to me from the customer of what they wanted to
huh.
see because I grew up with the Henry Ford mottos ringing in my head of, you know, if I asked the customer what they wanted, they would have said faster horse.
Right.
And so you intuitively take that to believe that you can't see that the customer's directive is the one you should follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for us, it ended up being, I think, the right path, which was we had one initial problem we wanted to solve. They then shifted us toward a second adjacent challenge that they figured our technology could be helpful for. And many years through that process, you now land with what Sparrow is today.
Yeah. Wow. So lots of pivoting and listening and learning and evolving along the way.
Yeah.
How did you find your co-founders and
Mm.
how did you know that you guys were going to work well together?
So one of my co-founders I grew up with, he and I went to the same school together, and he was always smarter than I was, significantly by a country mile. As far as you can get away from my intellectual horsepower was him, just on the exact opposite end of that spectrum. And he ends up going to this program at Penn,
Okay.
select program for engineers and business like minds called M&T. When he was there, he was doing some research for professors. And I think that at the time he was looking more toward academia
Uh,
as a path forward. I'll put a pin in that co-founder and I'll return to him in just a
okay.
moment. My second co-founder, I met at a program in Israel.
Okay.
So we were doing this 10-week long program together.
Uh,
And we first started out as gym buddies.
nice.
I love the gym and I love going to it with guys that love it more than I do because they push me harder.
Right.
Now, when we were gym buddies, I saw the seriousness with which he would take his workouts. And I'd like to consider myself a decently fit person. He was like my other co founder was blowing me out intellectually, he
Okay.
was blowing me out of the water
All
physically.
right.
So, all this comes through in May of 2020, where I had an original co founder with Sparrow who, to no fault of his own, at about the 3 month mark, said, this really isn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a year older than me at Stanford and great guy, by the way. Still to this day, I would
Yeah.
consider him a friend.
Totally.
And at that point, I then thought to myself, well, there goes the technical prowess falling out
Mhm.
from under us. I know how to code, but candidly, not well enough to do something big. And at the same moment that that first co-founder left, I happened to be back in Los Angeles and I saw Griff, who was the
Your
technical mind
childhood
that I was the
friend.
childhood
The
friend.
smarty one.
And I was telling him about what I was working on with this guy from Stanford. And also around that same time was reconnecting with Daniel, who's the gym buddy who went to Duke. And so the three minds came together pretty organically. And I thought to myself, well, if Daniel has the work ethic to outcompete me in the gym, and Griff has the mind to outcompete me in the classroom, there might be something magical if we put all three of these things together.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was.
What do you bring to the table,
Absolutely
Harrison?
nothing. I'm like the I'm
Too
like
humble.
the
Too humble.
I'm like the monkey with the tambourines, just clashing it together.
Untrue. I know you. That's great. But I love that you guys like complement each other, and maybe that is part of the secret to a great working team.
I think it is complementary skill sets for sure. And I've reflected a lot about this as we've started to take a new chapter to Sparrow and really grow the business and
Yeah.
bring on a lot more in headcount. And I think beyond the non-overlapping skill set, which is for sure helpful in the beginning, perhaps the most important piece is trust.
Yeah.
It's trusting that your co-founder knows that what you're giving is your best and reciprocally from them to you. And it's that trust that carries you through the troughs. You don't need trust when you're going through the peaks.
Mhm.
That's easy. But you need a lot of trust when you're waiting in the desert
Yeah.
and you really don't know if you're going to be able to pay yourself in the coming month. You don't know if you're going to be able to execute on your product vision. You don't know if there's genuine customer demand for what you're doing. It's the innate trust, the blind trust in saying, we don't have it all figured out, but I trust you to work with me to
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
And that's really rare because you don't really know if you have it until you get to that point.
Yeah.
And by the time you're at that point, if you don't have it, it's already too late.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
relationship's going to crumble in some form or capacity. So I think beyond the fact that we had non overlapping skill sets, which was convenient in the beginning for sure to launch a product, over time, it's been the trust that we've leaned on that has carried us to where we are today.
That is such a valuable insight. And I think a lot of the founders, up and coming founders that are watching this are going to take that nugget and remember it. So you've got this group, you're building the company. Let's talk about some highs and some lows. Tell me about the moment when you said, "Hey, I think this might work. I think
Hmm,
we're on to something here."
sure, sure. Um, well, I'll talk about the lows first. I think that LinkedIn is kind of like the Instagram of one's professional career.
Mhm.
It's these select moments of, we're so excited that we raised X to do Y,
Yeah.
and everybody's raising X to do Y. And you think to yourself, damn, I haven't raised X to
Yeah.
do Y.
Yeah.
That sounds like I'm not just behind the eight ball, I'm not even close to it. And I think for us, it was really hard to, in the beginning, to be completely candid. When I graduated, a lot of the friends that I had at Stanford were extremely ambitious, and none chose to go straight into starting their own thing.
Yeah.
They went and worked for Meta,
Yep.
Snapchat, Palantir, so on and so forth.
Oh,
And you look at the scale that they're given
yeah.
at 21 years old, not to mention the compensation,
Yeah.
and you think, did I make the wrong decision here? Like,
Yeah.
is there something that they know that I don't? Maybe I had some blind conviction in myself I shouldn't have had. And no matter how self confident one is, I find that it's truly challenging to not make the initial comparison and be totally comfortable looking yourself in the mirror in the morning and saying, on the outset, it may look like I'm unemployed, but I feel like I'm onto something special. And I think that for myself, I went through that for at least the first 12 months from graduating when everybody has their analyst class of some sort and I have nobody.
Right.
Well, it's not true. I have my two
You have your
co-founders.
2
I have my two
co-founders, but
co-founders
still.
who I trust, but we don't have a collective that we're looking to see if we're doing okay.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
just got to go off of our own intuition. So I think the first low point was an emotional one.
Yeah.
It was this feeling of being lesser than. And it's unfortunate that it takes so much hindsight to come to that realization, but it was. And then you try and overcompensate in different ways by putting things out there or talking about your successes.
Right.
And you realize in time that it's all very shallow. So the first piece of the low point for us was, I would say, waiting in the emotional desert that was needing some form of external validation from a party that we shouldn't have been looking for.
Yeah. Can we just pause there for a
Yeah.
moment because I think this is really interesting and I am sure that so many founders because you are smart, talented, incredible people who could do a lot of things. You could go have those jobs that your classmates were getting. So what enabled you to stay the course? Like how did you not let that grass is greener sort of get the best of you?
You can't see, but I'm getting the goosebumps when I think about that because in the moment, you don't really know. I so distinctly remember, and there are conversations with our co founders that I won't get into the details of, but you have these moments where you're having a genuine conversation to say, is this going the way that we hoped it would? And the answer is no. And that's really scary
Yeah.
because you've foregone something really exciting. Your two co-founders they've trusted you. There's a high opportunity cost with your time. Sure, you can say you're 21 years old, you're 20 years old. What does it matter? You're going to find your way in life anyways. You know that in hindsight, it's hard to think that in the moment. You think
Sure.
it's the end all be all. So, what got me through it was them. It was knowing that if I'm going to be in this boat, at least they're going to be in it with
Mm.
me. And for better or for worse, I do find that there is some amount of nurture to having been brought up with the mentality that I'm going to see this thing through all the way to the end of the line. And if it's not the right train, so be it. But I'm sticking on it until I get there. And that was something that was ingrained to me by my
Yeah.
parents, my grandma, with the things that they did in life. So I think the first piece was knowing that I was in the trenches alongside two guys that I really
Yeah.
trusted, helped a ton. The second was having the familial upbringing and the value put into someone that you will see things through if you commit to them. And I think the final piece was we got just enough.
Uh-huh.
It was never a moment of lightning in a bottle where you think to yourself, I'm the second coming of Jack
Yeah.
Dorsey. It was never that. But it was always just enough. Like in the beginning, it was a heartbeat. And then it looked dead for a second. But then there was another heartbeat. And you're waiting for those. You have no idea when they're going to come. So if you put all three of those things together, it allowed us to have the resilience. The last thing that I'll say to this too, and I give this advice to anybody who's thinking about starting their own business, find your why and you'll be able to get through anyhow.
Mm.
What do I mean by that? Well, the problem that you solve is not going to change.
Yep.
How you solve that problem may iterate over time. But if you fall in love with the problem that you want to solve, that is the best partner in the world you could have.
Yeah.
Because you know that you'll be thinking about that problem when you go to bed at night, and you'll be thinking about it when you wake up in the morning, and it's not going to change.
Yeah.
The nice
Yeah.
thing about these challenges is unless you do something about it, they're going to exist. So if you find yourself falling in love with the challenge, you don't really sweat having to pivot or iterate
Yeah.
along the way because you think to yourself, well, it's just the better iteration of solving the thing I intended to do in the first place.
Right. Right. Right.
So for us, we had this beautiful concoction of falling in love with our challenge, falling in love with our why, being comfortable with changing our how, having the right support system around us that we trusted each other, and perhaps the uncontrollable of being born into a blessed household that instilled these values in me at a extremely young age.
That's a powerful combination of forces.
I'm blessed.
So you persisted, and now can we talk about some of the highs? Now
Yeah.
can you tell me when
Yes.
you had kind of emerged from that emotional desert and thought, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this might this might work."
So there are all these different moments of external validation. And I think it's taken me a couple years to realize what's the most important
Uh-huh.
form of external validation. There is media coverage. So I participated in this series of events with different publications to get the word out there about
Yep.
Sparrow. And naturally, that garners a lot of attention and interest.
Yep.
And that's one form of validation.
Forbes 30 under 30.
Exactly. That's one example of that. Um, there is another form of that where you do speaking engagements like these. What I have come to realize is the most important form of validation, bar none, is not the interest that you receive from an investor. It's not the interest that you receive from, I know that I'm speaking to one of my investors right now,
It's okay.
but I love the validation, but it's not the most important
Yes,
form.
of course.
It's not the validation that you receive from media. It's not the validation that you receive from a friend that you meet back at home on a Thanksgiving who tells you it's so cool that you're doing what you're doing. All of that is great. But the form that matters the most is from the customer.
Mm.
It's when the customer says, you're able to uniquely solve a challenge that I have, which is a pressing challenge that I want to solve right now. And the way in which you solve that is more differentiated than what I could do otherwise. And otherwise is a pretty broad bucket. When you get that form of customer, that form of validation from the customer, you know you're onto something special. And for us, I'll give you an example of what that looked like. So we work with these credit unions, and for the sake of their privacy, I won't mention which of our competitors, but a competitor of ours.
Okay.
Um, we started to hear some murmurs that they've been bought and sold by private equity a few times, and the level of service that they've provided their partners has just fallen precipitously off a cliff. And I wasn't entirely sure if that was murmurs, rumors, or
Mhm.
something that was true. This business is an old business. And I realized that we were really onto something special when I didn't just meet somebody who wanted to switch over from this partner, from this other incumbent competitor of ours. And it wasn't that she just worked for this incumbent. She worked for them for 4 years, then decided to switch over and become a chief marketing officer of a credit union. And it also wasn't just that. She then referred us to the partners that she used to work with at this incumbent provider.
Ah.
It was also that a couple employees outside of this individual that had previously worked at this competitor of ours, which I have never met personally. I've never met these employees personally. I started to get outreach from different clients of our competitor saying, "Hey, I spoke to X person who previously worked at fill in the competitor's
Yep.
name, mentioning as our contract was coming up for renewal that I should seriously consider the solution that you have to offer." And I thought to myself, if somebody who was previously employed
Yeah.
by a competitor, multiple people who were previously employed by our most formidable competitor, felt so compelled to go out of their way and stick their neck on a line for a product they've never seen directly, for a company they've never experienced firsthand, and suggest that as the alternative to what they knew intimately over a multi-year time frame to someone that has a important decision to make soon, that's a form of validation that I love. So when you get things like that, that's when I start giving high fives around the
That's
office.
incredible.
The media attention, it's nice, it's fun,
Sure.
but it doesn't mean a whole lot
Yep.
if the customer doesn't value you in the same way that I've just described. So the point of, do we have product market fit?
Yeah.
It comes from customer
Yeah.
validation. And there are moments that will arise. And for the founders out there who haven't yet felt the the wave of revenue that comes from that,
Yeah.
you can have leading indicators. So for us, before the wave of revenue started, the leading indicator was a prospective partner that was willing to jump ship on the idea of having this new thing. Then you think to yourself, well, there's a real challenge here. There's a real pain here that's worth solving. So the highs for me came from forms of customer validation, and each of those have progressively gotten larger in scale. So in the beginning, it was maybe a message back to us, or then it was taking on the product and nixing the other thing. Then it was going out of their way to suggest us having never met us before. And now it's becoming different evolutions of that.
Yeah.
So those have been the true highs. Of course, there are company milestones along the way and this and that. But seeing the baby that you've created mean something to somebody that much that really understands it is extraordinarily gratifying.
I love that. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about hiring. Founders always come to us for help and advice on hiring. It seems, and I'd love to know your opinion, to be maybe aside from figuring out who your co founders are going to be, one of the most important things to get right. So I'd love to hear, and I'm here at your office, so I just saw a big room full of all the people that you've hired over the years. Talk a little bit about how you've built the team. And if you can, tell us about a hire that maybe wasn't the obvious choice, but you're so glad you made it. And then is there a misstep that you've learned from
Sure.
along your hiring journey?
Hiring has been one of the more vexing parts for me of building a company because I've never been hired. having started this
Right.
thing as an undergraduate, as a junior,
Yeah.
the only organizational structure that I know is that which I've created. I don't know anything else. And so it's been this weird dilemma where you both see a best practice, read about it, hear about it, then think to yourself from first principles, is that the way it should be or just the way that it's been?
Yeah.
That's a broad overarching context informing what I'm about to tell you about, which is I think the tried and true model that we have found is whatever you're hiring for, the competency, the technical competency to achieve that role doesn't have to be coding. By technical competency, I mean, can you do the function that we're hiring you to do? So if you're on the sales side, can you meet quota? If you're on the success side, can you activate? If you're on the tech side, can you code at a high quality and quantity? So we take to it that those that we hire, the technical competency is table stakes. We'll receive hundreds of applications that can do the job just as well as the next person can. And maybe you can say, well, in that swath of resumes, maybe I can find somebody on the margin that could do the job just incrementally better than the next
Mhm.
person. That's possible, but you'd have to wade through, if you're a compelling organization, hundreds of applications before you find that person. What I have found to be a guiding North Star through this is a couple of different questions. The first of which is I really want to understand kind of like how a brand or a reputation is what's said when you're not in the room. So too am I trying to suss out in the hiring process, what are you doing
Yeah.
when I'm not in the room or
Yeah.
when the company's not watching?
Yeah.
And it all goes back to that level of trust.
Yeah.
Do I trust you to come in and do as good of a job
Yeah.
as you are selling me that you'll do?
Yeah.
So that's the first piece of we really want to understand and suss out, can we trust you? I think a second piece to that is we'll then corroborate that not with your on sheet references, but with your off sheet
Hmm.
references. So, who in your network, if I ask you for a reference, I can't imagine you're going to give me a bad reference.
Right.
It's going to be your highlight reel of professional relationships. Instead, what I want to understand are those that are not top of mind for you.
Huh.
So we'll try and
Like
find
who?
exactly. We'll try and find novel ways of getting to individuals that you may not have thought we would speak to about their experience working with you or knowing you, but we want to speak to them
Yeah.
to really know what it's like to work with someone again when we're not watching. And a third piece of that on the hiring front is we've actually decided not to take an opportunistic hiring approach
Mhm.
insofar as hiring for need that doesn't exist. We hire once the need does. So on the success side, there's a certain number of accounts that a success manager can hold before they start to have a diminishing marginal return to those that they serve. Well, if we see that wave coming, we'll introduce the next success manager. But we're not going to do it opportunistically, thinking that we might have a huge quarter. We'll do it as the plan evolves
Uh-huh. Why is that?
because we want to be capital efficient and ensure that when we hire, there's no bloat.
Uh-huh.
We don't want to operate with margin where someone we have an extremely strong culture and we're very upfront that we work hard.
Yeah.
In our handbook, employee handbook, we don't say it's a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
So we want to ensure that when we bring somebody on, they don't come with it's beyond just hiring for having a bench. It's having the cultural expectation that a bench exists. You are the last line of defense. And we want you to operate with that level of ownership. So that's been our mentality about it. And it's not to say that it holds us back. We'll bring on talent as we see need coming. We're just not going to hire for need that doesn't exist. In the last piece of this on hiring, I have found that the missteps that we have had have been when we've disregarded all the obvious signs
Mm.
in hope and prayer that it's going to work out. So there are instances where in the first couple of months, you think to yourself, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'll give it a second chance.
Sure.
And then you give it a third chance. And you think, well, no, they just got to course correct because there's a cultural misalignment and they came from a big company and it's something. If you find yourself having to make a continued excuse, You can find the answer you're looking for in the questions you're afraid to ask. And I've had many of those missteps, as I'm sure many have when they've been building their businesses. But for the ones that have been extraordinarily successful that I did not anticipate, for example, the individual that helped me build the sales organization into what it's become today was not a seller
Huh,
before we introduced him.
really?
No, he was, I mean, maybe he would fashion himself as a seller, but in true form, he was a Schwartzman scholar. And he was an extraordinarily bright guy, an intellectual. He worked in China, but I wouldn't say had a 35-year tenure sales
Right.
career.
It wasn't on his resume.
Wasn't on his resume. Or our lead front end engineer right now. He was actually an investment banker
Huh.
and then decided at a certain point in his life that he wanted to switch that around because it wasn't gratifying to him.
Yeah.
And although he didn't have the resume of coming from, ex Uber, Stripe, and Google, I loved the fact that he had the fearlessness to pursue his genuine passion later in his career and then made the jump, demonstrated the behavior that he wanted that. And what that told me was when I'm not in the room, you still love this. You're not just selling me on it. Or for the guy that came from the Schwartzman program, when I'm not in the room, evidently you must love this.
Mm.
So I'm looking for those cues. And it often doesn't come from somebody who's been working in the job for a certain amount of time. You can find it in many novel ways if you're looking for the right things.
Yeah. Harrison, you've got to find the people, but you've also got to get them to choose. You got to pick them, but then they have to choose you. You have, from the moment I first met you, struck me as a very charismatic leader. Like you have a quiet charisma that I think draws people to you. What do you say to the people that are Schwartzman Fellows and former investment bankers who I'm imagining that guy probably had to take a pay cut to come and work for Sparrow? Talked about the why for yourself to get you through. How do you sort of inspire the people that come to work with you with the why? Because you work with credit unions, which some might say is not the most sexy, world to be in. So how do you, and yet I feel like somehow you've done it. So talk a little bit about that.
Any gracious words that you have for me, I will graciously accept, but pass along to a much smarter and brighter team who makes it easy to look good. On the piece of bringing somebody into an industry that they candidly have no prior experience in, we sometimes will hire from industry, but mostly like an engineering hire, for example. There's no guarantee that that
Yeah.
person has come from the credit union industry.
Yeah.
In fact, often doesn't come from. The pitch to bring somebody in, I like things that are very simple.
Yeah.
I don't want to overcomplicate it. And I think that the things that work out in life are the things that are most simple. So, my pitch to anybody joining Sparrow is extraordinarily straightforward, which is I explain our 5-year vision and talk about where we want to go. I then shift into a discussion of how the role that we were talking about bringing you in for is critical for that vision. You are a mission critical part of building the future that I've just laid out. And we will align your compensation structure such that if that vision works out, you will personally benefit for it along the way. If you don't wake up every morning thinking about credit unions, that's okay. If you don't go to bed at night thinking about credit unions, that is a okay. I don't expect you to have that coming in. You'll get that over time because you'll see that who we serve genuinely are phenomenal standout people.
Mm.
And I don't want you to manufacture that love. You're going to find it over time.
Yeah.
So allow me to provide you with a simple structure that is enticing upfront, agnostic of who we serve. And then what you will find over time, I can guarantee it, is that as you meet those who we work with, you cannot help but fall in love with these people. I love them so much. I joined the board of a credit union. I live in New York City. The credit union I serve on the board of is in Warren, Ohio. Last time I checked, that's not a drive away from New York City. And these board meetings, by the way, they're not quarterly, they're monthly. If you would have told me 24 months ago that I would join the board of a credit union in Warren, Ohio, I probably would have called you clinically insane. But I have fallen in love with credit unions because they have so much to offer. And I am never going to be there to tell a new hire that they ought to find their way to that love artificially. I know they're going to find that way to that love organically. So it's my job to put in place a very simple structure to allow you to succeed, and you'll find your way to that passion as you get to know who we serve.
Amazing. You have definitely piqued my interest in credit unions. But I want to move on to AI. We've got to talk about AI. How is AI changing the way that you are building your company, running your company?
So I think from a operator perspective, AI is largely bucketed into two broad categories. You have the operational efficiency that it can drive for the back office. So what types of processes that a customer doesn't see can it streamline or cost consolidate, et cetera. Then you have customer facing
Yep.
opportunities. We're doing both. We've largely started on the former. And that's everything from revenue ops, finance ops, legal. Everything now has some semblance of AI embedded into it,
Mm.
which has materially and noticeably brought down our cost structure.
Can you give me one example?
Sure. On the revenue ops side, or I should say on the expenses side, having to shore up books every month is usually the work of an accountant.
Yep.
And it might take an accountant, I don't know, 15, 20 hours to close books by the end of the month. Empowered by AI, it might take that accountant 5 hours to do it. And if they charge me on a per hour basis, that's 15 hours of cost savings for an accountant over 12 months,
Yep.
which isn't insignificant.
Yep.
So that's just one example of AI making an immediate impact. As you shift AI for the customer, I have a pretty unique stance on customer facing AI problems. And as you can probably tell, I kind of feel like I come from the school of the Jeff Bezos, Sam Walton, Saul Price mentality, which is the customer is your number one. I live, breathe, and die for the customer. So much so that I joined one of my partner's boards. I would tattoo the words credit and union across my chest. I love them so much.
Don't do that.
To my mother's dismay, I will be assured not to. So when I think about AI, it's not, it's a tool to otherwise enable solutions to challenges we could not solve without it for our customers. And that's how I think about it is what challenge of my customers can I use AI to solve that I otherwise would not be able to solve if it weren't for said artificial intelligence? There are many avenues where you can take that. For us, the most immediate application is sourcing best practices. So this is probably where it would merit explaining what it is that we do.
Yes.
And what we effectively do, the simple way of thinking about how the platform operates today for a credit union is I'll explain it in the context of a customer problem. So, and by the way, I say the word customer because the podcast is mostly for founders, but it's important to express we don't say the word customer when we're partner facing because we don't see them as customers. These are our partners. And I genuinely hold that to be true. In fact, customer is the C word at Sparrow, not the C word you're thinking of.
Okay.
It's the Sparrow C word. We don't like saying the word customer, but for the sake of this, I'll do it to be explicit. So with the ways in which we serve our partners, what we do is if you, for example, are a credit union and you want to automate the process of onboarding a member, reboarding a member, cross-selling a member, front-running account dormancy of a member,
Yep.
you usually don't want a person to do that manually. It is both inefficient and ineffective. You'd want software to run it for you. That's in effect what our software does, is it automates those processes for credit unions from data ingestion all the way through ROI analysis. So that's ingestion, analysis, actioning, execution, and ROI analysis. And it's broadening from there. Now, one of the challenges that a partner might have is they say, well, how do I best front run in a HELOC opportunity? Say somebody has a mortgage. How can I get in front of their need for the HELOC,
Uh-huh.
on that mortgage, on that house? So, what an AI could be deployed for is crunching an enormous amount of data to see how have other partners of ours in the past
Mm.
thought about front running a HELOC, and then leveraging the insight and analysis, then suggest and rebuild the type of journey that other partners have been running successfully for those considering it in the future. That's an example of a challenge that would otherwise be untenable for a human to support, but is straightforward for an AI to support. So I always think about it in terms of what practical application will it solve? What problem will it actually solve that a partner of ours really cares about that I otherwise could not solve deterministically, but would have to solve probabilistically. And that's how we think about AI and its deployment.
How are you using it? Um, just
Personally,
yeah, as a CEO, how do you use? Yeah.
oh, ChatGPT has been my best friend. So I find that I stumble over words, I can't find adjectives, my emails might be more terse than I expected or acerbic than I wanted them to. So I'll maybe give it a glance over to ensure that it's
Yep.
touching all the right points or it's got the right tone to it. And personally, I spend my life on Zoom. We have partners all across the US. We're in 44 separate states, meaning I'll be speaking to a Zoom screen from 8 a.m. through 7 p.m., 5 days a week. And the time that I'm not, I'm going to be following up for
Yeah.
those meetings or having internal product discussions. And so you have to be efficient in note taking. You have to be
Yes.
efficient in admin work. And an AI, a ChatGPT like or a Gemini, is extremely beneficial
Yeah.
for all of the back office stuff.
Yeah. 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 Um, let's talk a little bit about Shakti,
Mm.
and investors. So I was not around. I was not on the Shakti team when you met Kaval. So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Before I dive into that, I'll just mention that he is a star in a dark light. Whatever term I can use to wax poetic, that's him. He is a standout gem,
That is nice of you.
well deserved,
Well deserved.
well
I
deserved.
agree.
And he's a rarity in the investment community. Many, the inve- I think the job of an investor is largely in the world of sales. They're selling dollars and they're buying shares. And a dollar is a commodity. As long as you're a relatively competitive business, you can find many a dollar. So there has to be some level of differentiation or service brought to the dollar that would make it more compelling to take that one versus the other one
Mhm.
when both of them are just as green.
Yep.
Kval makes that differentiation extraordinarily clear. And here's how. And I'll explain the story of how he met.
Great.
Kval was the first investor that I ever spoke to. Now, if you think that I have a cherubic face and a youthful spirit now, imagine me 6 years ago. I didn't, I was fresh shaven, glasses on, what you'd expect
Adorable.
of a engineering Stanford 19, 20-year-old. To Caval's credit, he did not discount or discredit that individual in that time. He took him seriously in a way that nobody took that guy seriously. Not even my parents took me as seriously. And he didn't ask about all the ways that it would go wrong.
Uh-huh.
He was ideating with me about all the ways it could go right,
Nice.
which sounds trivial, trite, like a platitude. It's not. When you're 20 and 19 years old, you have an extremely fragile view of the world.
Mhm.
It is it's like a Fabergé egg that you've got to really protect
Yeah.
because one bad knock and the whole thing splinters. Kval did his best to do that and has done that along the way. So how we met was I reached out when I was a Stanford student and he started to ideate with me about what it could be. Along the way, as we have evolved, he has stayed as excited as day one. And when he comes and he's a board observer at Sparrow. And I know that when I bring to the conversation, the board conversation, the different considerations that I'm thinking through, both tactically and strategically, I'm always waiting for his input as I know that he has some novel, unique thought to contribute. And I cannot express how much that's helped over the years and saved us so much time when he does one minor realignment or
Uh-huh.
one minor question that we haven't been thinking about that we ought to answer
Yeah.
before we do that thing
Yeah, yeah.
that saved us both time, energy, resources, effort across many a year. So you asked for a sentence and I gave you a novella.
This is
I
great. I
apologize.
was gonna you answered all the questions that I was going to ask. Is there one specific moment that or story, cave wall story that you want to share with us?
I have many. I can give you one. So we were at a board meeting not too long ago, and we were talking about how big Sparrow can be. And for context, 132 credit unions, by the size of these credit unions, we serve about a little over 4% of credit unions in the United States. Now, internationally, there are many more credit unions, but in the United States, there's about 4% on our platform, which on the onset of it feels like both a little and a lot at the same time. And when he asked us at the board meeting, he said, is the scaling of the business, is it supply constrained or is it demand constrained? And what he meant by that is, are we not at 40% by next year because we don't have enough partner success managers to handle those accounts, because we don't have enough, partnership development officers to go out and form those relationships, because we don't have enough engineers to build the product out further? Or is it because the 40% demand doesn't exist in the market? Of course, we had a confident answer that it was the former.
Yes.
It was being supply constrained, but I'd never thought about it in that
Mm.
framing before. And when you think about it in that framing, you then readjust the mental models that you have to answer the question. So when he said, are you supply constrained? And my answer was yes. It then made me think, well, if we are supply constrained, let's work backward from where those constraints exist and hire behind them. And that's again unlocked a new chapter of growth for Sparrow. Many might hear that and think, okay, dum dum, that's what you should have done in the first place. Well, I can tell you, when you're in the weeds day on day and you're going from 8 to 7, 5 days a week, and you eat lunch with your camera off while a call's going on because you don't have time to consume it, it's hard to remove dum dum from the weeds and see the forest. And so his one minor question, which took all of 6 seconds, helped to do a alignment readjustment strategically, which has shown a lot of fruit over time. I could give you 50 more examples of that off the top of my head.
That's a great story. We're here at your office, and I somewhat in jest said, "Hey, wouldn't it be fun if I said, go take the most interesting thing off your desk and talk about it on the podcast?" And you did just that. And so I need you to tell me about the most interesting thing on your desk
Okay, yes.
you have brought into this room.
Yes. So we're in our conference room, and my office is a little that way. And the most interesting thing on my desk is what I call the $1 million pen. For some backstory, when I started the business with my co founders, I think that my parents were extraordinarily supportive. They could not have been more emotionally there for me at every single milestone and have continued to do so. One of the ways in which they wanted to help me envision what it could be was my dad went out and he got me a nice pen. And he
Oh,
said, this is for the big deals that you sign. Now, granted, at the time, I was still giving my co founder, Griff, Cokes at 4 p.m. to keep his caffeination levels up so that he would continue coding late into the night. Like, we were very far away from needing to use this pen. In fact, the ink would have probably dried before we could use it. But I kept it on my desk as a reminder. Now, for some context, we were in my parents' garage. So my desk wasn't much of a desk. It was a makeshift Costco pullout table in the garage
nice.
with some shoddy Wi Fi. But I kept the pen on my desk, hoping that one day, at some point, $1 million sounded like a lot of money. And it is a lot of money. I said to myself, I will sign a document which generates $1 million with this pen one of those days. And I've kept it on that desk ever since. When we closed our latest financing round, which was well over $1 million, I used this pen to sign that deal.
Love it.
When we eclipsed each $1 million ARR milestone, the partner that helps us to eclipse that milestone, I use this pen to sign that deal. And I do not use this pen for anything else. So it's this, sort of metallic pen that has stayed on my desk, both ceremonially as a reminder to myself that there is much more to come, but also as an appreciation for all those that have helped get us to this place of where we are today, and recognizing that even though it is a pen, it is very much a team effort. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together.
Absolutely.
And pen is a physical reminder of that.
Let us close with a quick look at the future. What do you hope to sign with this pen in the coming years?
Our objective, we want to reinvent relationship banking in America. And I hope that this pen does that along the way. I hope that this pen sees to it that the average American can receive materially lower APR on their loans, knowing that an average American doesn't have enough money to cover an emergency medical expense, let alone an extra $20,000 on a mortgage or an auto loan. I hope that this pen helps to make that reality one where that American doesn't have to unexpectedly go through these unnecessary expenses. I hope that this pen brings and sees to it that the stored energy that is credit unions can be disseminated across mass market in America. And it's a broad vision. It's one that can't be defined by one particular manifestation or one particular permutation of what it looks like, but instead the mission is empowered by deals along the way that will be signed with this pen.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Harrison. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for bringing the pen, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It's a ton of fun.